Alright guys and girls, today we're going to be installing and reviewing the Dakota Digital Odyssey Series 2 fuel pressure gauge. Look at the gauge. It feels pretty nice in the hand, you know. This is made of aircraft quality aluminum. The actual bracket that holds it into your pod or into your dash or whatever is set up really nice. And then you can take this apart in your hands and get that around the wires fairly easy. On our last gauge install and review, one of the issues was the actual way that it attached to the pod. It held the wires out of the way. The only thing I would have liked to have seen on this was it to be orientated this way, with the wires going down when you were installing it, but instead it's up. But it's not a big deal because look at what Dakota Digital did for you. They've got these little screws in the back here that you just loosen up, pop your wire in there, tighten the wire or tighten the screw back down, and it's hooked up. That's your grounding spot right there. I mean, really straightforward. Now there are a lot more wires going on here. Look, this is the sensor, a lot smaller than the last one as well, but the wires were only to right here, so you had maybe 2.5 feet of wire. It's not going to do it for sure, and it's 4-wire sensor, so I took the liberty of making a full harness that'll go all the way to where we need it to go. And then I made harnesses for the other side, for the gauge side. So this will be a power harness right here. And this is a signal, the white wire. And then this is the ground right here. It grounds to the back of the gauge and then carries 3 different grounds. One is the actual ground coming from the sending unit. Also, the sending unit is shielded. So inside here is a metal foil, and also inside there is a bare wire. And what that does is it gets rid of signal interference, and it actually grounds any like background loops or anything like that out. Alright, so one of the first things we've got to do is actually get the sensor in place. Now this is just loosely in here. I put that in there when we did the last gauge install and I removed it. Now these threads are self-sealing threads. So you're not supposed to use tape or a thread sealer or anything. It actually says on the instructions from Dakota Digital that that pressure gauge is self-sealing. So we're going to trust them on that. Normally I would put a little thread sealer on. Let me go grab a wrench and we'll get that tightened. Alright, this is a 7/8 fitting. I got a pair of pliers on here just to keep it from twisting too much. Really don't think it's going to take that much pressure. But we won't know until we fire it up and see if it's leaking. It seems pretty good. Definitely on there tight. The next thing is routing all these wires up through here. A few of them need to go through the dash. One of them's a ground that's going to be grounding on the outside here. I made this wiring harness to where I could have the under the hood portion disconnect from the cab portion. That way if I ever need to replace the sensor, I can just unplug everything, pull the sensor off, rewire a new sensor with the plugs, screw it back in, and just go from there. I won't have to mess with anything on the inside. The same goes for the inside. If the gauge goes bad, I can disconnect it and still have all of this wired up and ready to go. Since we did that last gauge install and I had to pull everything back out when it didn't work, I learned from that mistake and went ahead and made up a harness that you can take apart. Alright, now that we've got the sensor hooked up and the wires routed to where they need to go, and don't worry, all this is going to get cleaned up once we're finished. But we've got everything under the hood finished. Now it's time to move into the cab compartment and actually hook the gauge up and go through the test procedure and setting up of the gauge, because this Dakota Digital gauge actually has firmware on it that you can set a high pressure sensor warning and a high or low pressure sensor warning. So we're going to get that done and then we'll get back to you. Alright, so the setup procedure on this gauge is to hook it to power. I'll go ahead and get this out of here so I can show you. You're going to want to hook power to it, and then where it says send, this is without the sensor hooked up. This is with only the gauge hooked up, which is another reason why I did the wiring the way I did. So you get it powered up, and then you tap that send wire, or that send spot right there in the middle. You can tap that with a power source, and it will set it into program mode. And then you have to do consecutive taps to set each setting, and I'm going to get that set up and then I'll get back with you and show you the results. I got the wiring done, we've got it hooked up. I don't know if you can see that, but it's registering in between 6.8, and when I give it gas, it goes up to a little over 7, almost up to 8 at some points, which honestly is a little bit too much for my carburetor. That might be the issue I'm having, is too much fuel pressure instead of it being low. But that's the reason we're doing this gauge, so that we can figure it out. So let me get it finished installed and I'll show you the final. Alright, got it plumbed, wired, got everything tucked away where we want it to be. I know it looks ugly right now, but the entire engine and all that wiring is coming out anyway at some point in the next month, so we'll live with it. Alright, this is the view from inside. Let's see. We've got the gauge hooked up here. Let's take a look if I can find my key. it's because it's set to give me a warning if it drops below 2 psi, which I basically set it that low because I didn't ever want it to just start flashing like that. Right now I'm diagnosing some stuff. Now it looks like it'd be great, right? 6.8, but it's going to keep climbing, and if I give it some gas, I've seen as high as 9 psi, which is, if this gauge is correct, is too much. I think that might be the problem I've been having. I thought it was a low fuel pressure. It turns out it might be too high. I may be going with a pressure regulator. But it definitely fluctuates. So there may be something going on in my fuel system there as well. I've also seen it get as low as 2.2. And that's while I was driving, just cruising up a hill. So it was at high vacuum when it was doing it. It definitely fluctuates. I'm going to be checking all the lines tomorrow and going from there. But that's what... This is a view of the Dakota Digital working. I have this set to low speed on the I have the update speed to this set to low so that it doesn't just fluctuate back and forth so much. But when I had it set to high, you could see the pressure was fluctuating quite a bit, and it still every once in a while will drop down to say 5, or if I rev it up it'll go as high as 9. Of course that's probably the problem with the fuel system, not the gauge. Alright folks, well we're finished with the gauge install. Everything's tightened up there, it seems to be working fine. It's given me some more things to work on, so I guess next we'll be diagnosing the distributor vacuum advance, because I think that's the next thing that's wrong. Anyhow, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.